You know, sometimes the line between a classic children's story and a real-life medical mystery is, well, it's way thinner than you might think. What if I told you that growing impossibly tall or shrinking down to the size of a doll wasn't just a fantasy? That for some people, it's a terrifying reality. Today, we're heading straight down the rabbit hole to explore a real medical condition that is every bit as strange as fiction: Alice in Wonderland syndrome. So, our story really kicks off with this: a seemingly ordinary paper from a 1955 medical journal. In it, a British psychiatrist named Todd did something pretty remarkable. He took a whole collection of bizarre, frankly terrifying symptoms that doctors were often just dismissing, and he gave them a name. He offered a sense of validation to patients who felt completely alone and afraid. The genius of how Dr. Todd started his paper was he immediately made this connection to a story that everybody knew. He pointed out that Lewis Carroll's Alice didn't just change size. Her whole world, her very sense of self, was constantly shifting under her feet. And that became the perfect, if a little unusual, starting point for what he was about to describe. And that right there is the crucial question his work forces us all to ask. Because for his patients, these unbelievable distortions were happening when they were wide awake, and it was leading them to question their own minds, their own sanity. So Dr. Todd proposed a name that was honestly perfect. It was both memorable and clinically spot on: the syndrome of Alice in Wonderland. It just fit so well, not only because the symptoms were so surreal, but because it hinted at this really fascinating possibility that Lewis Carroll himself, who we know suffered from migraines, might have been writing from his own disorienting experiences. So, what is this syndrome exactly? Well, Alice in Wonderland syndrome, or AIWS, isn't just one single thing. Think of it more as a collection of symptoms where a person's perception of their own body or of the world around them gets totally warped. All of a sudden, things can seem way bigger or smaller or closer or much farther away than they actually are. But this was never just about neatly cataloging weird symptoms. This was about solving a very human problem. See, before Dr. Todd's work, these patients were often just brushed off, called neurotic. The paper itself says that many would torture themselves with secret misgivings concerning their sanity, just suffering completely in silence. You know, the most powerful part of Dr. Todd's entire paper is that he just lets the patients speak for themselves. Their descriptions are so vivid, so personal, they give us this incredible window into what it actually feels like to go through this. All right, so let's start with how the syndrome messes with a person's sense of their own body. Patients talked about feeling as if they had suddenly grown to an impossible size, or on the flip side, shrunk down to nothing. Get this. This is a quote from a 39-year-old woman who'd been worried by these feelings since she was a kid. Just try to imagine that for a second. Suddenly feeling like your body has expanded to fill the entire room. She even said that other times she'd feel like she was shrinking up completely. But the distortions didn't just stop with their own bodies. Oh no. The world around them would also morph and change in the most bizarre ways. The technical term for this is metamorphosia, where stationary objects suddenly seem to shift in size, or shape, or even distance. I mean, think about the experience of this 43-year-old housewife. Her own bedroom, a place that should feel safe and familiar, would suddenly just transform. The walls would seem to stretch away from her, turning the room into a long, narrow hallway. And this is a really key point. It's a distortion of reality, not a total break from it. Okay, so let's be super clear about this, because this distinction is everything. We're talking about illusions, not hallucinations. Patients who have these episodes see the world as distorted, but, and this is crucial, they never lose sight of the fact that it's an illusion. They know the wall isn't actually moving away from them. That awareness is a key part of the syndrome, and it's also part of what makes it so deeply unsettling. So what on earth could possibly be causing these strange perceptual events? Well, Dr. Todd saw a very clear pattern emerging. He connected the syndrome to two well-known neurological conditions: migraine and epilepsy. To explain this, Dr. Todd came up with this absolutely brilliant analogy. He compared the whole experience to looking into one of those wacky funhouse mirrors. Your body hasn't actually changed at all, but the mirror, that is, the part of your brain that processes your body's size and shape, is temporarily distorting the image. This points to a very specific origin in the brain. So, where is this funhouse mirror inside our heads? Well, the most likely spot is the parietal lobe. The easiest way to think of it is as your brain's internal GPS and reality checker.
It's constantly figuring out where you are in relation to everything else. So when a migraine or an epileptic event messes with this area, that whole internal map just goes haywire, and your entire sense of physical reality can be thrown completely off kilter. And the relationship with these conditions isn't always so simple. As the paper explains, these Wonderland symptoms can show up as an aura before a migraine hits. They can happen right during it. Or, and this is pretty wild, they can sometimes completely replace the typical headache, becoming the main event all by themselves. And this really brings us to what might be the most important part of Dr. Todd's work. It's not just about classifying a strange set of symptoms. It's about the profound human impact of finally giving a name to an experience that is deeply frightening and isolating. This quote, which Dr. Todd actually included from another researcher's work, it just captures the intense fear these patients were living with. They kept these experiences a total secret because they were terrified of being judged, of being misunderstood, or worse. The fear of being seen as queer or mentally unstable, it was just overwhelming. And that is why just giving this thing a name was such a game changer. It was a lifeline that was rooted in neurology, not in psychology. For the very first time, patients could begin to understand that they weren't going crazy. They had a recognized physical syndrome. And this, right here, is the ultimate takeaway in Dr. Todd's own words. The diagnosis was so much more than a label. It was an assurance that their symptoms are not necessarily the prelude to insanity. It was a powerful tool that for so many replaced terror with understanding. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? The connection between Alice and this syndrome. It just shows how art and science can sometimes reflect one another in the most unexpected ways. It leaves us with a final question to think about. What other medical truths might be out there, just waiting for us hidden in the lines of our favorite stories?